Welcome to our webinar, Encouraging Your Red Raider to Make Connections on Campus. We are very excited to have you joining us here today. My name is Christine Self, Director for Family Outreach and Engagement with Parent and Family Relations, and I'll serve as the moderator for today's session. This webinar is part of our Parent and Family webinar series, where we share information on topics of interest to Red Raider families. In a recent poll that we conducted of current students' families, they identified relationship and social skills as a life skill that their student needed the most guidance with. And that was the basis for us, deciding to have this webinar today. We hope that this will provide you with insights into how your Red Raider can make connections on campus and feel more invested in their experience here at Texas Tech. If you have joined us for webinars before, this one will be quite different from what we've done in the past. This webinar is less of a presentation and more of a conversation. We have 3 expert panelists with us today who have a lot of experience working directly with undergraduate students, and they'll be sharing their perspectives on how students make connections with others and build relationships. Our panelists are Nancy Robinson, Assistant Director and Practicum Coordinator at the Student Counseling Center, Dion Green, Managing Director of University Student Housing, and Tanya Massey, Senior Managing Director of University Student Housing. Our plan is to keep this webinar to about 30 minutes or so. If there's time at the end, we'll open it up for questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. Please do hold your questions until that time. If we don't get time to answer questions, don't worry. I'll also provide resources and contact information at the end in case there's not time for questions. I'll also follow up with an email, including all the links and resources that we'll share a little bit later today. We are recording this session and posting it to our website so that you'll be able to review it again later or share it with others. And I'll also email the recording link to you at the same email that you used to register for the webinar. All right, so I'm going to end sharing my screen and we're going to get started. Let me end that really quickly. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and get started with our session. What I'll do is I have some questions that we will use to guide today's discussion, and each of our panelists will answer the questions and share their perspectives. So I want to get started with this kind of starting question for us. How has COVID changed the way that college students make connections with others on campus? And any one of you can jump in and answer.
I can answer. Having a college freshman myself this year, I think one of the things is they lived behind a screen for multiple years, either through distance learning or not being able to socialize with their friends. And so getting back out of their room and having face-to-face conversations has been a little bit of a challenge as they've gone through that. One of the things that I've told my student is just say hey to 3 people every day, a face-to-face hello, ask them how they're doing. But to start a conversation, because that's a skill that they haven't done and practiced very much over the past few years. And so it seems a little bit more daunting to them.
I would agree with everything that you said, Tanya. I think an added piece that I would say is that I think, as you said, what the students are kind of out of practice of some of the in-person interactions, and that can increase some anxiety. And I will say, we're definitely hearing a lot at the Student Counseling Center. If you hear it on the radio and the TV and documentaries that, social anxiety and anxiety about social situations has increased some. And when I say social anxiety, I'm not talking about it in terms of a clinical problem, but more just that we're feeling more anxious about social situations. I notice myself, going to gatherings and groups, I'm feeling a little more on edge because we haven't been doing it a lot. And then the whole thing about mask or no mask and that whole thing. So I think being really supportive of your young adult as they kind of re-enter this, because being on a college campus is you're around people all the time, especially if you're a freshman. I mean, you're around people in the dorms as well. And, I mean, I think it can be a big adjustment, a big leap. So, just being supportive of what that adjustment feels like, and even relating to your own feelings of reentry, and then thinking about what it might feel like for your young adult as they do the same.
I think also, our students have been able to be anonymous in some form or fashion with COVID. And I notice when I walk around campus that they all have their earbuds in.
Yeah.
And so I make it my mission to look at them and say hello, and I know they don't necessarily hear me, but I also, I'm trying to get them to be like, hey, you don't have to have your earbuds in all the time, you know, interact with people. Come on, we're face to face again. Let's get back in the business of human interaction. And so I think it takes all of us trying to remind our students that, hey, there was a time when you probably needed this. We need to get back into the face to face, the personal interactions, the smiles, the eye contact, that kind of thing too.
I think also some of the things that I hear working with families is that families often compare their students' experiences to the experiences that they had when they were in college. And I think that looks very, very different. And so trying to kind of avoid making those direct comparisons, because, it's just a different world now. I think oftentimes I'll hear families say, oh, college was, the best time of my life. And sometimes that feeling of that is tempered by years of distance from that time, and just remembering there were times that you probably were a little insecure and maybe not feeling on that same footing that maybe you felt in high school.
Absolutely. I think we have that wonderful memory that we tend to not remember as much some of the negative things, and we tend to remember the positive things. And so I think we do have to be really careful about making that direct comparison and setting up those expectations, because that can feel very pressured for your students, if they feel like, yeah, mom and dad this was their best time of life, and why is it not feeling like my best time right now? And so I think, listening carefully to kind of where your students at as they're making the adjustment, both to being back from COVID and also being here on campus in general.
I think the pressure on students is different now too. With social media, there's just so much pressure that they internalize, whether it's true or not. And they feel like they have to be somebody that maybe they're not. And I think that's what we work towards here on campus, is trying to help students make connections and find out who they are, who their authentic self is, and who they can be. Student success is huge, and we try to get them to that point. And so, it's a very different world that I've been working in residence halls since I was in college, and it's just such a different world now. And, we're doing our very best to try to help get them out, get them engaged, and try to find ways to have them connected, because we know that the connection piece really brings a sense of belonging. And that's what we work towards in the residence halls every day, is how do we get our students connected, and how do we create that sense of belonging, that sense of home.
Well, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because that leads into my next question, which is, what advice do you have? What can students do to be more connected and invested here at Texas Tech?
I think some of that is it's very individualized for every student. Some students may be very outgoing and they really enjoy that. Some other students may be more of what we would consider a homebody. They don't want a big, huge group event. And so in working with your student, asking them what their interests are, and then helping them find the resources on campus to connect to that. Is it a faith-based group that does small groups, so they have a small intimate group of friends and connections? Is it the football games or something bigger there? I tend to tell students to connect to one thing that you're interested in and one thing within your academic major, because I think that gives them networking skills, but it also gives them some personal fulfillment for what their interests are. And I think it's very hard to walk into a student group where you don't know anyone, but you also have to kind of think from the context. Everyone else in that student group is in the same boat. They don't all know each other anyway. And so really, if we can get them to go across in that first step, into the room, that's a huge win for them. The other piece of it is sometimes it's leaving their room and sitting in the lounge or the lobby of their building. It's talking to their neighbor, at the sink in the bathrooms, whatever those type of things are. But again, we're out of practice for that, and so those small steps, just little increments there, are how we build those long-term connections.
Yeah, I really like, that's a cool, I may steal that, Tanya, that idea of telling students to both thinking about something within their academic major, but also something that just really interests them. The advantage, I think, of the interest and going with that as part of trying to connect with others is that then when they walk into that room, they know they have that in common. And so even if they don't want to talk a lot about themselves, or they feel self-conscious, they can talk about that thing that you're interested in and you're all there together to do. So yeah, sometimes just doing some of the rec sports and doing finding that club that is your other people that enjoy your hobby, or if it's kind of doing some of the outings that they have through the rec center, those are all some great things where you might meet people with shared passion.
I would also add that I would say the majority of our students, or many of our students, are coming to college from high school careers where they were uber involved in all kinds of different things. And college is a little different. It takes a while to transition. It takes a bit to learn how to do your laundry and do things that, we like to call it adulting. Sometimes it takes time to transition and get in your groove with that. The courses are different, the classes are different. And so how do we help our students find that great balance of, not too many activities, but not too little and too few? And how do we help them balance all of the different things in their life now that they may not have had before when they were at home, or they may have? Many students come with great skills and great abilities to manage their time, but a lot of students are still struggling and still learning how to do those things. And so I think here at the university, and I know in housing and in the counseling center as well, I mean, we all work together to try to help our students learn skills that they're going to need in the future. And how do they work with all of that? And then, kind of, we see students who have passions in different areas and trying to connect them with those areas and get them involved in different ways. Because if we can get them engaged in some form or fashion on this campus, then we keep them here at Texas Tech and we see them through to whatever, their end goal is. We hope that that's graduation, but for many students, it may not be, and that's okay too. And so we do our very best to be that supportive piece, that connected piece, so that our students get what they need.
Another couple of pieces of advice that I often share with students who may identify as being introverts is, get involved in an organization by volunteering. Because then you're going to an event, maybe there's a lot of people there and you don't feel comfortable. But if you have a job to do while you're volunteering, you have a reason for being there. Maybe you're helping with checking in people and you get to say hello to them, but you have a job to do. You don't feel like you're standing there wondering, okay, how do I go up and talk to somebody? Because you have a task that you're there to do. I also encourage students to get a job on campus. That is a great way to get very invested in your university because you're learning more about resources, you're interacting with maybe other student assistants that you work with. You can form relationships and friendships there as well as getting some great experience.
Well, the other thing about that, the nice thing about having a job on campus is they're going to have a supervisor who's a staff member here at the university that really, in a lot of ways, those people become extended family. They're your mom away from home that you go to when you need to sew a button on or do some of those things. But I really do think, students, when they work on campus, they have better time management skills. They really connect to the university. They understand more about some internal processes that they may not see if they're only on the student side. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and I want to also reiterate a number of you have mentioned this kind of all the tasks that a student's dealing with in terms of the adulting and also doing all these things that we're hoping that they do to connect. And I think as parents, sometimes I know I also have 2 kids in college and elsewhere, and my temptation is to kind of like, okay, yeah, do this and this and this and this, and kind of make that list and tell them to do it all. And they may need to do it at their own pace. And so, all these things we're mentioning are just great ideas. But if you have a student who is feeling overwhelmed academically, they may need to focus a little bit more on that for a while, get their grounding on that, and then kind of do some of the, add the job on campus, or, every individual student is different. And so kind of listening to where they're at in those different realms of their life. And not feeling like, okay, this is a checklist that has to get done the first week on campus or the first month on campus, is, really cater it to your individual, son or daughter.
Well, and that leads me to my third question. So excellent job of segueing here. How can family members talk to their students about some of these topics without applying too much pressure? And that's the hard part, right? How do you encourage your student to make connections without, overdoing that pressure that we've been talking about?
Bless their hearts, but they always think moms and dads don't know anything, right? We are the people that it's different for us. I really do think some of it is giving them the resources. I also think it's really important to maybe think about the vernacular that we use. Don't necessarily say, hey, have you made friends? Because they've had friends for their whole high school career that are really long-term developed relationships. What they're making now are just connections that will hopefully develop into really solid friendships, but that takes time. And, 2 months, the 2 months that they've been here may not be enough time to really develop what they consider friendship. The other thing is, sometimes they don't want to hear it from family, but they may hear it better from a peer. And that's a great opportunity where if you see your student is struggling, Dion and I do a lot of conversations with parents where we tell people, reach out to the department. We can have the community assistant or a community advisor go by and make those connections. And sometimes hearing it from another student is a great way to get information across that they'll take a better advantage of than hearing it from mom or dad.
That's awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that thing about the CAs. And their ability in the res halls to kind of go by and check and have those kinds of conversations. It's a great resource because, I agree. I think hearing it from a parent, and again, I'm talking about myself here too, and how I am with my kids. I'm worried about them. I can't see them. I'm used to being the person in charge of getting them here and there, or at least knowing where they're going and, being able to set eyes on them. And that doesn't happen. And so that's hard. And so sometimes I think my own worry kind of causes me to be a little intense in how I approach checking in with my students and my kids. And so I think if you can use some, just say, hey, what kinds of things did you do this week? And did you meet anybody that was kind of interesting? Or, as opposed to, yeah, have you made friends? Because that's a lot of pressure. And I liked what you said, Tanya, in terms of comparing it to the friends that they may have literally known since nursery school or kindergarten. And that's just not going to happen right away. It takes time to make those kinds of relationships at that level of intimacy. So just, being kind of understanding about that, and being careful not to put on, more pressure on, your young person who's just trying to make a go of it.
I work with a lot of graduate students, and I find that, I don't want them to make the same, sometimes take the same path that I did. And other times I want them to take the exact same path I did. And so I always have to fight with myself and be like, okay, it's all about options, kind of highlighting you have options, and let's see what options we have available to us. And there's not just one right path or wrong path. It's what's, what can you work out that helps you grow as a human and helps you develop as a human and helps you academically so that you're doing well in your studies. And so I always like to try to really remind myself I have to offer options, and then it's their choice, free will. It's their choice as to which direction they go. But here are some, and I don't like to give them the options. I kind of, we work through it together. Like, oh, what do you think some options might be? And so I think, that's taking it in a little different route, but it's the same thing of just making sure that they understand they have options, and it's not just, because I think that's when the anxiety comes in, is if you think you just have one choice. That's difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, it's really important, and we remind our staff about this, is your student better than we will ever know your student. And if you're seeing red flags, that is a great time to call. And your student may not be responding to what you're asking, but that's where to contact the university and say, I'm concerned about my student. They're disengaged, they're struggling. I'm seeing some warning signs here. And we can intervene. I think the number of times I've stood outside of a door and said, call your mom, and they'll say, I'll call later. And I'm like, no, call right now. I want to see you make the phone call. But if there's worrisome behavior that you're concerned that may be escalating, that is where I encourage you to definitely call us, reach out, because I think that's what our role is in a lot of ways, is when we see students really struggling, they may need more help than just encouragement. And we want to be able to step in and reconnect them if they need to visit the counseling center, if they need to visit health services, whatever the need is, we can help direct them towards the right location with a little bit more intentionality, because we're right here on campus.
I like the fact that you that we're hearing about, again, reaching out for help, and my office is certainly here for you if you want to use our office as a sounding board. Hey, this is what I'm seeing with my student. What are some options for me? You may forget everything that you've heard today, but know that you can always call me. Are there any, you mentioned some kind of red flags or some kind of warning signs? Are there things that folks should look out for if they think maybe it's beyond just maybe not making connections, but maybe something more serious?
So one of the big things is just, and this is hard because what I was going to say is big changes. If they just seem very different. But it's also hard when we're talking about, young folks that have come from being with you at home to a whole new environment, because they may seem different and they may be fine. That may be part of how they're adjusting to this new environment and trying on some new ways of being, which is part of normal development, as it in this phase. So I think Tanya mentioned this, if you feel like there's a kind of a withdrawing, Maybe your student was involved in some things and seemed like they were having a good time and they were talking about it, and then all of a sudden not so much so. They're and certainly if they're telling you that they're feeling very alone, and having trouble with some things that might be going on with their peers. Those are possibly some red signs to be concerned. I think the more you open up a conversation with your kid in terms of just being open to what they have to talk about, the more they may feel like they can share with you. I think sometimes when we get, and I've been there too as a parent, when we get into the kind of grilling with questions mode, it becomes more interrogative, and then they're not as likely to feel comfortable sharing. So if they come home for a holiday or some time home, and just sitting with your young adult and taking time to not always but just spend time interacting and asking them open-ended questions rather than feeling like you're having to find out details, and just getting a sense from them in a more informal way can be really, really helpful.
That's wonderful. Well, we're getting toward the end here, but I do want to share some resources with you. Let me get back to my screen sharing really quickly. All right, so hopefully you should see a number of resources that were provided by University Student Housing. So Dion or Tanya, would y'all like to highlight a couple of these for our audience? And please don't worry, I'm going to send you a follow-up email with all of these links in it. So don't worry about trying to screenshot these or capture them. I'll send you the links.
Dion, go ahead.
Okay. It's like rock, paper, scissors. So a couple of things that I want to highlight is that we have several student organizations within housing. And so if your student is wanting to start more locally, we have plenty of student organizations. And so the Residence Hall Student Organization page is there, the Residence Halls Association, and we have several more that I would highly recommend that they start at. Each hall has a complex council, and the complex council is a great place to start in your hall. I remember that's what I did in college, and I never dreamed that I would continue in housing all these many years. Also, our residential tutoring, if your student is having some challenges with some of the basic courses that students need to take, that information is there, and so that gives some academic support that they would have. Also, we have what's called an academic improvement plan. So if students are thinking, hey, I need to do a little better in this area, or I just don't even know where to start, there's some great information on that page about an academic improvement plan. Last thing I would add is just employment. We employ a huge number of students. I would say upwards of 250 students in University Student Housing, in lots of different kinds of jobs and positions. And so we always have vacancies. We are, you can just jump on the page. Your student can jump on the page, and gives them some idea of which positions, and it also gives them an idea of how to go about the selection process. Anything else? Okay.
And then we also have some resources provided by our Student Counseling Center and our RISE office on campus.
Yeah, so I just want to highlight, I'm really excited about, there's a couple, in addition to our website link, which you have, there's a couple of self-help resources that the university has invested in to help students who may not need to or want to come to the Student Counseling Center, but are interested in really getting some help and support a little bit more than what maybe we've been talking about. My SSP is brand new to us, and it provides on-demand mental health support for students. they can simply use chat or phone call and talk to a counselor person in the moment, 24 hours a day. And it's not the same counselor every time they call, but it's something they can utilize if they're feeling really overwhelmed, not sure how to use some of their good coping skills. Then that person can kind of, talk through with them, help them get grounded in what they're dealing with, and help them problem solve in the moment. And then they will, and if your student needs more, they'll make that recommendation that they might need more. But that's just a great resource. It's brand new to us, and we're all really excited about that, how accessible it is. Together All is also a way for students to connect through an online community. I know we hear a lot of negative online communities sometimes. This is a positive one. It is monitored by folks who know what they're doing and are going to be helpful in steering the peer groups that form on it. So that is just a great resource that RISE is getting together and launching. And that's going to be very helpful to students to feel not alone in some of the struggles that they have. And as was mentioned by others here on the panel, peer support and advice is often much more well received than hearing it from an adult or a parent. Therapy Assisted Online is a great self-help resource. We've had it for a couple of years. There is just tons of helpful information on everything from anxiety and stress management to relationships, and just a whole bunch of really good information there. And you go and you use your TTU email to register and make an account, and then you can have access to all that information through the search engine. You can fill out some questionnaires and it'll steer you to what might be helpful if you prefer to do it that way. And that's just an awesome resource that students have.
Wonderful. Well, as I suspected may have happened, we have run out of time. We are at our end here, but please do not hesitate to reach out to Parent and Family Relations if you have questions or want to get connected. There's also the websites there on your screen that you can look at and find out more about resources. And as I mentioned earlier, I will follow up with an email a little bit later today with the recording link from the session, as well as all of those resources that you saw shared on your screen. I want to thank our panelists today. I thought this was a very wonderful and helpful conversation. I hope that you found this conversation helpful to you. Hope that you will come see us for Family Weekend next weekend. We're looking forward to hosting families on campus in person for a wonderful weekend of activities. So be sure and visit our website and Morgan has put it in the chat for you. That's where you can find out about the schedule. We're going to be following up with our email subscribers next week with a kind of last minute, here's what to expect at Family Weekend email. So we hope that you're coming. If you're not able to come, don't worry. Visiting Texas Tech when it's convenient for you is always great. And we have some resources for that on that page as well. So thank you once again. Have a great rest of your day and enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye, everyone.